Building Men is brought to you by Finish the Race Apparel, FTRapparel.com, the creators of all things building men, and by Become Stronger Industries, become-stronger.com, the creators of handmade steel maces, hammers, and other badass equipment.
But I do think just keeping a record, keeping a journal, creating a dialogue with yourself, understanding what is making you tick, your frustrations, your fears, and beginning to get that crud out of your mind and onto paper is the best therapy you'll ever do.
You're listening to the Building Men podcast with Dennis and Anthony Miralda, brothers on a mission
to help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back, or welcome if this is the first time that you're listening to the Building Men podcast. I'm excited today to talk to a guy that I met via Instagram. And one thing that I'm really fascinated with, one of his Instagram, the pictures that he has on Instagram are absolutely tremendous. You look at some of these pictures, he just looks like this unbelievably wise human being that I want to sit down and smoke a pipe with in a smoking jacket on a leather chair. Just like he has that vibe going on. And we connected a couple months back. I was on his Instagram live and had a really cool conversation. Couldn't wait to have him on the Building Men podcast. He is an attorney, an Army captain, a Harvard grad. He loves helping men. He loves helping men become the best versions of themselves. So if you're a fan of the Building Men podcast, you know this is right up my alley. Welcome to the podcast, Lance Kennedy. What's up, brother?
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure, man. So what I'm going to start with is the whole idea of legend. I love the word. I absolutely love that word. And so what I did was I started to think back about my own experience growing up. And when I think of legends, the first thing that I started to think about was sports figures. And so for me, I started to think, who were some people that I would consider legends? And I started to think of Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky, Joe Montana. I even thought of like Hulk Hogan when I was growing up was an absolute legend. So when you hear that term legend, when you think back to your own experience growing up, who are people that you would consider to be legends in your life?
Well, first of all, you dated yourself. I mean,
absolutely.
And those are the sports, figures. I would have added, Randy Macho Man, Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior. Cream of the crop. I think all those guys you named were absolute legends, and they built amazing reputations and created momentums for the stories that they propelled. I would add, boxers, Mike Tyson, if you want to throw out some 80s figures, or Arnold Schwarzenegger. These were legends in my mind, just because I think they had that real masculine persona. And then just on a personal level, my father was a legend in my mind. My grandfather was a legend to me as well. Just some of the things that they overcame and went through in their own lives. And, just goes from there. But as far as commonalities of people that, I looked up to that were alive and active, creating what I would call their legends, you named a lot of them. And there are probably many, many more than that.
All right. So let's go back to that time. You mentioned your father, your grandfather were like personal legends in your life. Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing then. I'd love to hear your story. I was a former middle school principal. I spent most of my career in the middle school time frame. So that adolescent time frame, which is so difficult for so many of us, going through enormous change cognitively, socially, emotionally, physically. So when you have a solid, stable, steadfast type masculine figure in your life, it helps young men out so much. So I'd love to hear about your upbringing. Take us back and give us a little bit about who you are growing up in that time.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, my family, they're all almost entirely from the Deep South, and we're mostly working class individuals. Both my grandfathers, neither of my grandfathers, I should say, graduated high school. One had a 6th grade education. The other one got his GED eventually, but really hardworking blue collar dudes. My father grew up in poverty in East Texas during the Jim Crow era, and graduated segregated high school in 1966 in Texarkana, Arkansas. So we're right there on the border with Texas. But the reason I bring that up is that definitely that background informed me in some of my kind of the ways I view the world when we talk about things like blue collar masculinity and things that are qualities and characteristics I don't think are indicative or what we'd associate with Harvard or universities such as that. But my father was able to overcome his poverty. He became a very successful megachurch pastor in Dallas, Texas. and founded a church there in the late 80s, grew to about 6,000 members. So every Sunday I saw my dad, speaking to thousands and thousands of people, impacting lives. He started a large charity called Clothe a Child, which exists to this day, to kind of replicate some of the charitable acts that were given to him as a kid. And so, I saw a lot of these, I think, achievements on his part, and just that raw charisma that enabled him to create and maintain a movement like he did. But in 1999, you brought up middle school. I was in actually fifth grade, about to go into middle school the next year. My father suffered a massive stroke, and that stroke really knocked him off at the knees. And so, my kind of strength, support, stability in my life, what a father I think represents archetypally, was taken away from me in a large part. And so, my middle school years were in part trying to teach my father back how to read and learn his ABCs. Wow. and kind of, reintegrating him back into his role as a pastor. But he recovered in a large part. His sermons are online, but, his church didn't. There were some demographic changes, early 2000s, that were taking place and where he had planted his church, and it eventually demised and merged with another congregation. So I saw the life cycle of this large megachurch congregation. They had 2 television shows at one point on the big broadcasting networks. The reason I bring this up is, I think I've seen both men at their peak and then men when they're at their hardest, the valleys, so peaks and valleys. And I've also seen a lot of and experienced early on a lot about human nature, about how flighty people are, disloyal they can be, really the meaning of family and what that means. And, this kind of experience I had with my father's religious institution, which was kind of, it's hard for people to understand this, but like our church was not just the place we went to on Sundays or once or twice a year, like some casual Christian maybe do. We were there 2-3 times a week, if not more. This was our social life. This was my father's income. This was everything. And so when it became unstable, that sent me on a very early journey to seek out truth and spirituality and to journey inward, which eventually I think culminated many years later in the formation and distillation of what I put into Legend Builders. So I just wanted to bring it home, but that's kind of a large, very short synopsis of my story arc.
And well, one, I appreciate you sharing that story with us and thinking back to what you had gone through, right? Like, so you have this man as this figure of solidarity, and you see him rise above and start inspiring other people, and then see him physically unable to do things that perhaps he was once able to. And I think young men go through this spot where they really associate the physical fitness aspect of it and being able to be stronger than another person with masculinity. And what happens is, once you get to a spot, and this is how I grew up too, Lance, is where my father was like very different. He was a role model in some ways, and in other ways there was a lot of detrimental things that he was teaching me. And it was about the way that you looked. It was about how much money that you made. It was about the material type things. And as he got older and his body started to break down and he wasn't able to do some of the things that he could once do, his identity that was associated with those physical things started to really deteriorate as well. So as you were going through this, and you said you had to be more of a caretaker to your father, how was his mindset like, I am still this strong masculine figure, even though perhaps physically I'm unable to do the same things that I was able to do before?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, well, that was always kind of, I think, a point of contention between us, because my father, still had his same drive. He still had his same, he's has a lot of raw masculine energy, right? I mean, his nickname was Buster, and every Southern town has a Bubba and a Buster.
Oh yeah,
right. A Buster, and he was the guy that was kind of the tough guy in his hometown. And so, he still had that part of him. His physical capabilities came back fully, but, he lost a quarter of his brain, his right frontal lobe. And so it was a miracle in the sense that his brain rewired, and he became much more compassionate and, tenderhearted in some ways due to the stroke. But he always had some level of cognitive difficulty. And, growing up, you want your dad to be someone you can bounce ideas off of or bring up thoughts or theories or things you're reading. And I never could do that with him. And it took me a long time to get over the frustrations, if you're a young 14, 15-year-old and you can't really talk about things with your dad at any elevated level. So it was always, I think, a little difficult and it could be tense at times, given that kind of framework. Like, he's my dad, he's my father figure. He's still the head of the household. He's the breadwinner. He fought against all that stuff to still earn a living and whatnot. But I think there was still some tension in me because I surpassed him in certain ways at some point. And it took me a long time to get over the frustration and things of that nature and really understand that it wasn't his fault. And it's just what the world or life or God gave us.
Right. And Lance, you had, when I did the intro, you were, we talked about the Army, we talked about Harvard, we talked about being an attorney. These are all things that you need to be very disciplined, very driven in who you are as a human being to get to that point. So you mentioned that, 1999 and shit, I was thinking my first year teaching was 2001. So I was teaching kids that were your age when you were that age. So to date myself again in that experience, but a lot of those things required that level of self-discipline, determination, steadfastness. Did you ever have a rebellious time, or were you always just on this straight road? I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm a legend in the making. Or did you have this time in high school where you push back against the grain a little bit?
Oh, I've always been a rebel, right? I mean, I'm a Southerner, so you got to be a little bit of a rebel. But I think there was always a level of rebellion within me, and I always pushed back against conformity and rules-based environments. Like, I thrived on one level because I could understand the rules and operate within them, but I also bristled at them at the same time. So there was this kind of internal conflict within me. And so while I was pursuing goals, I was also kind of rebelling in other ways. So, maybe there was this juxtaposition within me. I mean, I even at Harvard or even at, the other universities that I've attended, I'd also always find myself, or often find myself, an odd man out in certain social settings and whatnot, because, again, I just didn't want to play by those rules. But yeah, I mean, maybe I could mask it well. And that's kind of one of the things I teach legend builders is life is a game. You have to learn that there are rules to a game and you got to play around them, even if you don't like them.
So you're going from growing up in the Deep South, like you had mentioned. You had father's nickname was Buster, and that whole dynamic growing up. And then you move into the Northeast for college. So growing up, so I grew up in Jersey, but that influence of that, it was just a different way of life. It's just the way people interact. It's a lot, things just move a lot quicker, and it's just a different vibe, right? In that Northeast area. So was it a culture shock for you? Did you assimilate well, or was it more of a transitionary period for you when you moved up to the Boston area?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a culture shock. I mean, I had already attended university and law school. Actually, I went to grad school and at Harvard. So there was a period of time where I was being polished. And, when I can tell you that when I went to UT, actually at Austin, University of Texas at Austin, that was probably the bigger wake up for me, because I went from, basically thinking, our kind of upper middle class lifestyle made us wealthy. I mean, I was so naive. And then I'm interacting with these guys, at UT who I didn't understand like why they dressed like they were 50. I mean, like, that's the way I thought, right? Like why are they wearing slacks? Like, and then you realize they have been in prep schools, they've been prepared, they've been polished, they've been socialized to already adapt and be able to navigate kind of that leadership class of society. And it took me a couple of years at UT to really get my bearings, and I fell on my face, I mean, like a number of times. But my point is that was really the transitionary period. By the time I went up to Boston, there absolutely was, I think, still some cultural differences there, but I had learned a few lessons about life and how to navigate. And to be frank, I think that my peers somewhat tokenized me because, let's just be honest, like, Harvard's not a intellectually or ideologically diverse environment. And so, for them to feel like they were diverse, they would basically kind of bring me on board, or classmates, as like, okay, he's our token token Southern conservative wearing cowboy boots, you know?
Right.
And so like, I was the safe guy that would make them feel. So I think I fit in fairly well, and I still have a lot of friends up there and love visiting.
Do you fit into any of those stereotypical things wearing, you know, chaps and stirrups and belt buckles and cowboy hats?
I have cowboy hats. I wear boots. I mean, if I could show you my collection at some point. I mean, I got every exotic animal on my feet, you know, maybe not panda or baby sea turtles, but I got pretty much everything else. But no, I stay away from the boots or chaps, and or not boots, belt buckles and chaps. But I do have the cowboy hat and I do have the boots.
It's another level of when you're wearing chaps around. I've never seen it in person. Maybe I have. Maybe I've been to a rodeo or something where someone was wearing chaps, but that's a whole nother level of Southern, right? If you're walking around
Texan,
with chaps
yeah,
on.
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So one of the things that you talk about, Lance, is there's a date, and it's on your Instagram and on your website, The Legend Builders. You talk about something changed in 2007. What is the significance of 2007 to you?
Well, 2007 was, I had just entered college, actually, and this is what I was talking about. You know, there was you asked me about transitionary periods and difficulties adapting, and that was the year I really felt like I woke up and realized that I wasn't fully living to my own capabilities. And I had joined a fraternity, and I was wanting to go to law school, and my first semester grades were just not where they weren't terrible, but they definitely weren't where they needed to be. And a number of other things happened personally. You know, my family, as I said, you know, 8 years prior, my father had a stroke. By this point, 2007, my parents were struggling financially because his church just wasn't doing as well, and like I said, for a number of reasons. This also coincided with the subprime mortgage crisis and the economic downturn. So there were a number of factors at play, and so all that stress on me, and then this like internal stress, desire to achieve. I really wanted to become an attorney. I think if I had to call it a nervous breakdown, that'd probably be a little bit overboard, but it was something close to that. It was like an existential crisis. I just really felt like the universe was weighing down on me. I wasn't living up to my potential. There were so many factors that I couldn't control just bearing down on me. And that really motivated me in a way I never had been before to buckle down and focus. And that's where I started learning some of these principles that I know not only began to apply to myself to try to achieve goals and really up the ante on what I could achieve, but also help others and other men along the way do the same.
To have that period of that existential awakening at that point in your life it's really atypical. I mean, a lot of the young men that I work with are in that late high school, early college age range. And I think there is that going on, but to be able to recognize that in the moment, realizing you were put on this earth for a reason larger than yourself, to do that at that early, you know, the 18, 19 age range, to be able to say like, wow, there's this moment here and I could timestamp it. That's a really impressive thing to want to experience at that time. And then to really recognize I'm going to use what I'm going through right now to help other people. It's a really cool thing to have those moments, those timestamp moments where you know that something's changing, and to recognize it in the moment, to be like, this is the path that diverges in the woods, and I'm going to take this path for my future. So all the credit in the world to you. I absolutely love that. And you talk about, Lance, the 4 pillars of the legend builder mindset. So I'm going to do like a little Slumdog Millionaire thing going on here, because that movie it resonated like, as the kid is doing the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire thing, as he comes up, there's a question that's asked, and he goes back in his life like, this is the reason why he knows the answer to this question. And then something else happens. They ask him the next question. They rewind to this period in his life when he saw this go on, and that's why he knows the answer to this question. So what I'd love to do is go through your 4 pillars and tell me a little bit about where that came from for you, because they are absolute pillars. If you want to be a better man, these are all things that will work in your favor. So the first one is commit to running into the pain instead of avoiding it. Where did you come up with that idea?
Well, you know, it was just, again, anything that I put out on my Instagram page, and anyone listening to this, visit build.your.legend. It's my handle on Instagram. Anything that I've learned has been something that I put in practice or learned through my own life. You know, so I pride myself on organic material and organic development of the curriculum. So as far as, you know, understanding this one principle, this one pillar of Legend Builders about running towards the pain. Pain is basically, in my mind, a alarm bell, a siren, a signal that's telling us, hey, there's an important lesson to be learned here. There's something that's screaming at you to either change, adapt, or understand. So more often than not, if you think about the existence most men lead or most people lead, particularly in America or the Western nations, is a life that's dedicated and devoted to obtaining comfort and distancing ourselves from any type of discomfort. So this is precisely why so many individuals are, so addicted to alcohol or drugs or prescription or legal or whatever, pornography, sports ball, you just name it. There's so many different narcotics, real or metaphoric, but instead of going towards the pain, going to the lesson, the wake up that's basically being given to them, which is, hey, there's some lesson to be learned here. They run away from the pain. The only time we grow is when we go towards the pain. We run towards the pain, understand it, analyze it, and then make a change.
Totally. It's amazing what you're saying right here. Totally agree with it. And I've done a couple podcasts. One was called Embrace the Suck, right? Like understanding that one, life is going to keep teaching you the same lesson until you learn it. So you're going to keep experiencing that pain. If you keep running away from it, it's not going away. It's going to keep chasing you. It'll find you if you're hiding in the closet or under the bed. So why not go into it? And basically like, sack up, here's what's in front of me. I'm going to go through this uncomfortable situation, come out on the other side stronger. The second thing you say is think big, but choose your dreams wisely. Talk to us a little bit about that idea. Where'd that come from?
Well, you can do anything you want in life. I believe that. I think we can achieve whatever we want in life or most of what we want in life, but we can't achieve everything we want. So there's a big differential between what we want and everything we want. And sometimes that is conflated. So, we have to pick our goals wisely. We have to pick what we're trying to achieve, which is congruent with ourselves and our eventual goals wisely, because we can't achieve every single goal that we set out to achieve. I mean, I could list 1,000 things I'd love to achieve. The truth is that life is short. I only have so much time on this earth. I have so many days in the year. And no matter how hard I try, I'm probably not going to achieve everything on that list. So I have to prioritize, and I have to really drill down and see which things are truly important to me, which things are congruent with the life that I want to live. Some people really want to maximize security over freedom, and that's okay. There's tons of people that are like that. I don't blame them for wanting to do that, but they need to know what type of career to choose to achieve those goals. If you're the opposite, you want to have freedom. Well, hey, don't work a 9 to 5. That's going to give you a pension, because guess what? You're going to have zero freedom. Your whole life is going to be controlled. So you got to know what you want to achieve. Then you got to pick goals and aspirations that are wisely prioritized, that are in line with those goals. So choose your dreams wisely just means that. Prioritize and pick your goals and understand you can't achieve everything. So go after the big ones.
Excellent. And I was at a graduation ceremony this year, Lance, and the speaker at the graduation quoted Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. I love the guy. Awesome guy. I just love all the shit that he's doing there. And so when he quoted Mike Rowe,
literal or not with him.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And he basically says, Mike Rowe talked about, and it was controversial when he said it. He said, don't just wildly follow your dreams or your passions. Don't wildly follow the passions. What he said was, follow the opportunity and then bring that passion with you to the opportunities that present themselves in front of you. The way that I look at it is this. Instead of saying, and I say I'm working with a high school kid, the kid wants to play in the NBA one day, right? Oh, that's my dream. I'm going to play for the Knicks one day. I'm going to turn the franchise around. Again, a New York fan. They've been horrible for many, many years. So I'm going to play for the Knicks, turn that franchise around. So if you're setting that up as this is my dream, it's great to have these large dreams. I understand it. But instead, because the chances of that happening are minuscule, right? So why not say, I'm going to be the absolute most amazing basketball player to my physical capabilities. And then I will bring this passion of being the best basketball player that I can possibly be. I will work as hard as I possibly can. And then it's the journey that you're going on to every day get a little bit better, rather than if you don't make it to the NBA, now where are you? Right. So it's like, It's understanding like what you want to be rather than what you want to do in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the professional sports thing, like I have mixed feelings on it because, that's a tangible, definable goal, right? Like I want to play for the Knicks, but unless you're, let's say a sophomore in high school, unless you're like 6'9", sophomore in high school and just can ball, like you're not going to play for the Knicks. It's not even going to be, you're not even going to play for the training team, right? Like the B team. I don't know what they call it in basketball, the farm team or whatever. But, so there's a reality and there's a component, right, that you need to understand. You have to embrace reality and deal with it. So unless you're already, like I said, sophomore, junior year of high school, like the top basketball player in the state and really have pro potential, that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
So there are certain things that I think are definite impediments that you need to be realistic to your goals. And if you're not one of those things, you still want to play basketball, absolutely play to the best of your abilities. And, here's the truth as well. You could say, I want to be president of the US, but you end up the governor of your state, or you end up the mayor of your hometown. Like that's the way life, I think, oftentimes works. Because if you want to talk about the odds of becoming president versus an NBA player, it's much smaller. I mean, it's one person out of 450 million or 400 million people. So in the country. So, it's okay to have that high goal. You also need to, as you said, build in this understanding that, the goal is important. The journey is more important. Maximizing my potential and seeing where I can achieve is probably more critical.
So to your example, instead of saying, I want to be the president of the United States, I am going to be a man of integrity who will lead people in some fashion in the future. Then it's something you can carry that with you and make it fit into wherever you are. So as the opportunity comes up, that passion for leading people, doing it with integrity, having a charismatic way about you in front of a crowd of people and doing things in a political sense, carry that passion with you. What about you? When you were growing up, was there a large goal that you had for yourself in that middle and high school range? Did you want to, was it a sports thing? Was it leading? Was it more like in a congregational sense with your father?
No, I never wanted to be a pastor. Being a preacher's kid was enough for me. But I, it's funny. You look back at my 5th grade yearbook, and I probably was the most boring kid alive because I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And I always joke because you look at the goals on there, and the kids are like, I want to be an NBA player. I want to be I want to babysit for a living, or I want to be an astronaut. And I don't think anyone has ever achieved any of those things, but I achieved mine. I said I want to be a lawyer, and I decided early on that sounded cool. And hey, here I am.
That's amazing. Oh, and you were able to get to that point. And I remember as a 6th grade teacher, when those things came out, like, what do you want to be? And I remember I taught in a collaborative setting with a special education teacher. So I had 25 kids in my class. In each of the classes that I taught, 7 or 8 special needs students. And I remember one of the kids, they wanted to be a unicorn when they grew up. That was their goal. I'm not quite sure if they got there or not. Lofty goal. So when you talk about being a preacher's kid, did you feel the inherent pressure that you had to be extra, like, quote unquote, good? You had to, like, conform with the ways of the church? Was there ever this, like, oh, I need a break right now. I want to be like, I want to go behind the shed and smoke a cigarette and, grab a beer from the cooler and go a little bit off?
Well, yeah, of course. But, it's funny because, like, there's 2 professions that I found that have, like, support groups for the children of people in those professions. One are preachers' kids and the others are porn stars' children. So it's really interesting because they're so diametrically opposed in some ways and similar in others. I feel like that tells you a lot about the pressures and expectations that are on children of pastors, because you're always, under the microscope and being judged and so forth. I feel like my parents were pretty chill in most ways. Like they weren't, the theological term would be legalistic. Like they weren't really, it was a very grace oriented kind of congregation and church. But yeah, I mean, I think my frustration were dealing with other people in the church, just, seeing how they treated my parents and they demanded things. I mean, the average evangelical changes churches, I believe, like every 3 to 5 years. They church hop, and it's a business. I mean, you deal with lawyers and accountants and insurance and the EPA. We did a phase 2 remediation on our property because of natural gas under the property. I mean, like, you deal with all the normal stuff business owners deal with. On top of that, though, you have this like sheen of sanctimonious kind of glaze, right? That like lays over it. So I think I got frustrated at that. But yeah, I mean, there were times like, yeah, I mean, I think some of the instances, that are funny that I look back on is, and I'll send them to you. I was on a few like televangelist commercials.
Yeah.
And they're just really awesome to look back, late 90s, early 2000s commercials. Or Chuck Norris filmed an episode at my father's church. He was a member of the church. And so
Walker, Texas Ranger.
Walker, Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris. My dad performed his wedding.
Wow, that's amazing.
So if you look at Chuck Norris's autobiography, there's a photo of my dad in the middle of it. And it was cool in that way. You had a lot of exposure and great opportunities, Dallas, buckle of the Bible Belt, but you also had the kind of those pressures and weird experiences, I think, that only pastors' kids can really talk about.
Absolutely. Title of the podcast, Chuck Norris, Preachers and Porn Stars with Lance Kennedy, coming up on Building Men now. So to revisit those 4 pillars, the next one was embrace things for what they really are. So like being present in the moment. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, look, there's 2 views of the world. We have an idealist view of the world. Things should be the way that I want them to be, or my expectations are, or a realistic view. I'm going to look at the world and see what really is in front of me and then work with that. I fall into that second camp, and I fell into that camp after a large percentage of my life in the first camp, right? Like really trying to struggle and force the world to be the way I want it to be. And you look at, people today, I mean, they really are trying to bend reality to fit their whims, right? I mean, we could talk about 1,000 different examples, right, in our culture, but I think it's really, really, really critical. If anyone wants to deal with the world, succeed in the world, we should be able to impose our will on the world, but you have to use the rules, the laws of nature to benefit you, the laws of human nature. And a precursor to that is being utterly realistic, embracing reality for what that's worth, and then learning how to deal with it.
Building men of character, integrity, strength, compassion, and empathy through transformational mentoring, coaching, and motivational speaking is our mission here at Building Men. To work with me as a one-on-one life coach, you can find information in the show notes, or you can visit our website at buildingmen.io, where you can book a free 30-minute discovery call to help you become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Now, back to the show. It's really important. You see so many people out there. Well, just manifest it. You want the money, you want the house, just manifest it. Think about it, and it's going to happen. Which, sure, have a positive mindset of things that are potentially out there for you in the future. But then you got to roll up your sleeves and do the work. Like, you have to be like 100% real with yourself and what's going on in your life, and be brutally honest with the guy staring back from you in the mirror. Realize where you are, roll up your sleeves, and get to work in whatever path you want to forge in front of you. But recognize it's not just going to magically happen. The sweat equity needs to be there for those things to take place. The last thing is take nothing personally.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the hardest principles that I deal with each and every day, right? Because like, if you think about the way, psychological development happens, right? Like there's an Icarus effect, which is, the legend of Icarus. Icarus flies too close to the sun and he melts. And that's kind of the story of most of our egos. We're growing up, your parents are definitely spending lots of time, energy, attention on you. And so as your ego develops and gets stronger and stronger and stronger, you become the center of your universe. You are the center of the universe as a child. And so what happens is that ego gets inflated. And if you're not careful, you'll burn out. And so, the reason I say that is so many people, even as adults, have been coddled. They feel that they're a special somebody. They're the center of the universe. The universe bends to their will. They just have to think and manifest something. And so therefore, they take things, extremely personally when someone issues a microaggression or says something they don't like or has an opinion they don't agree with. I mean, they take these things extremely personally. And if you want to be a little bit more, I think a little less, let's say, controversial or incisive, just think about normal interactions with people. This guy didn't say hi to me, or his tone was off, or my spouse is not talking to me the way I need to be spoken to, or didn't do X, Y, or Z things that I wanted, her to do for me. Those are things that we're taking extremely personally, instead of realizing, hey, I'm not that special. This person treating me this way is probably treating everyone else that same way. They're treating me like a jerk because they're a jerk.
Right.
It's not because they're trying to treat me special. So one of the best lessons I ever learned was take nothing personally. Just like say, hey, I'm not special. They're not treating me this way because I'm particularly loathsome or they don't like me. It's just because that person's, a jerk. They're a negative person, and just ignore them and so that's what I mean by don't take anything personal.
It's a tough life lesson to learn, especially that the adolescent time frame where you don't identify with it's not like what you think about yourself, and it's not what others think about you. It's what you think others think about you. That's how you determine your worth at a period of time.
And your identity.
Absolutely. And so when you're basing how you feel about yourself on the opinions of other people, one, who cares? To be able to get to the spot where it doesn't matter what other people's opinions of you are, that is totally on them, right? It's about how you perceive that in your own world. So I appreciate you saying that. It is something really challenging for people to be able to do. Is when I work with educators right now, I use the acronym, or the Q-tip, quit taking it personally. Especially with educators, when there's a kid in the class and there's a behavioral situation where they're acting out of character, it's not because they don't like the teacher or they're trying to exact some type of revenge on them. It's probably that they're not getting a need met in a specific way and they just don't know how to deal with it. So it could be the same thing with adults. If there's someone who's acting like an asshole towards you, it could be that they're having a really hard day and that's just how they are treating people. So it's not about you. It's tough to step back and quit taking those things personally, but it is a good habit to employ for your own personal development. So those four things, I think they're really solid to be able to follow along with if you really want to make some positive changes in your life. When you're working with men in this program, this Legend Builders program, what are some commonalities that you see as far as challenges facing men right now?
Well, I think every man has two wounds, right? We have the wound of abandonment, and we have a wound of a lack of, and I want to call it self-esteem, self-worth, right? So there's these two wounds. I can't achieve it. I'm not good enough to achieve it. And then they're also dealing with the sense of abandonment. And that could be the sense of abandonment from their father or mother, someone in their early life that really didn't play the role that they expected them to play, or give them the type of attention or emotional feedback or whatnot that they really feel like they needed. So when I talk to men, there's those two commonalities. And so what I try to do is really strip away what I call the lie. So the lie is another fundamental Legend Builders concept. And the lie is really this complex of imposed strictures and beliefs and assumptions that men accept, right, in post-industrial age, right? We're still products of modernity in the Industrial Revolution, right? We're still trained to be cogs in a wheel and fit in a cubicle and work, 9 to 5 and so forth. So it's deprogramming them in some part from the lie and the assumptions that reinforce the lie. So if you're a revolutionary individual and creative, you're threatening the system. And so you have to keep men small, and you can't allow them to believe in themselves, and you have to placate them and drug them and tell them they can't achieve. And so it's really in part chiseling away at the walls of the lie, the prison they've been entrapped in, and really reminding them that they have this innate power, which I call their will, within them, that'll lead to their eventual destiny or their legend.
It's really powerful. And so your legend, when you mentioned the word legend and Legend Builders, it's, if you were to take a look back, so now we're say 30, 40 years in the future, and someone were to say, Lance, what does legend mean to you? Or how would you define that you have been a legend in your life? What would that look like?
Well, I mean, look, there's no bright line definition, right? Your legend is different than mine, and it's different than someone else's. But, as a concept, the way I distinguish, let's say, someone's legend from legacy or impact, it's those things, but more, because once we die, I believe it's a goal of each one of us to be remembered in some form or fashion. And it's extremely sad. I was looking at my grandfather, and there's virtually no mention of him online. I mean, there's his obituary, but nothing else. But he was a Marine in World War II, and he was a cop in San Francisco, and he was in the riots in Berkeley, and he knew Sonny Barger, founded the Hells Angels. I mean, he lived this cool life. He clearly impacted me in the way I live and my assumption about the world, but there's no mention of him. So I firmly believe that that's a tragedy, right? And what we need to avoid is that outcome. We need to make sure we're memorializing our lives. We need to be leaving impact, but we also need to be we leave this earth, and we build that each and every day. So that's kind of the hallmark of what it is to be a legend builder.
It's tremendous. It's a song by Macklemore, and he talks about, there's two times that you die. It's like when you're put in the grave, and then the last time someone mentions your name. Like those are the two death experiences. So when right now we have the ability to perpetuate someone else's legend based on the things that they did during their life, and to keep those conversations going, I think it's not only a great thing to do. I feel like it's our responsibility to do those things. And the personal legend thing, I mean, the book that I read every year on my birthday is The Alchemist, and in The Alchemist they talk about your personal legend, and it's to each one of us. It is an individual thing, but what does that absolutely mean to us, and then what can we do to help other people breathe easier, and then that our names are perpetuated after we're gone? And will people look at that with reverence and with a feeling of, wow, because this person lived, which is the rarest thing to ever happen, other people may have breathed easier.
Paulo Coelho and the Alchemist, and then of course Khalil Gibran, the Prophet. I mean, he inspired Paulo Coelho. I mean, they're so impactful, but we have to remember that, I mean, our legends are our lives and that journey, but it's going to bring us back home to here and now. And This is where we are going to find our treasure.
Before I ask my last question, one thing I just wanted to recognize that you put up on Instagram recently. You do several reels where you're just talking real. You pull up your phone or whatever, and you're just like, here's what's going on. Let me just throw it out there. And it is a very real, raw situation. And you talked about you were out on the road somewhere. There's, mountains off in the distance. And you're talking about, today, like eating liver, tanning your balls, taking an ice bath, because you hear these things so frequently. And there's this level of comparison, like, I'm not Liver King, I'm not, hello, Primal's Liver King here. I'm, going to eat the testicles of whatever bull in front. And then you feel like, because I'm not taking an ice bath every day, and because I'm not eating raw liver, and I'm not tanning my testicles, and you feel like there's this level of you're somehow lacking in that area. I love that you did that. What was the motivation for that reel that you did on Instagram?
I think I could probably share more views. I don't like bandwagoning, and all these trendy fads. These dudes that are all bandwagon boys, and they're all now eating their Liver King testicles without the supplements that he's taking. Let's be honest. He gets some special supplements that makes him as large as he is. But I think though that we have to remember that we can follow trends. There's nothing wrong with eating whatever organ meat. I don't think that's wrong. I mean, I liked my liver and onions at Luby's when I was a kid, but the point is those things are not going to really make that much of a difference, if any, in your life. All you're doing is showing that you're just another NPC out there, right? Like non-player character. You just basically are following another trend, showing virtue signaling to other men that you think are influencers, that, hey, I'm like you, I'm woke. I know what's really going to impact and maximize my life. I mean, I made another video about life hacks. Like I despise life hacks. I think most of them are trash, because if you just did the basic things, right? Wake up early, work out, eat healthy, get checkups with your doctor, and make sure your blood levels and cholesterol levels and triglycerides are in order. Spend time with family and friends. Don't drink, or drink in moderation. Don't smoke. Or smoke in moderation, right? Like you do the things that are common sense. Those are the things that impact your life, right, on the macro level, rather than these little tiny life hacks. Like, I'm going to do the Wim Hof method, and I'm going to go get the brown fat by being an ice. It's like, okay, well, spend your time doing that, but you're not working out. You're not eating healthy. You're not spending time with your wife and kids. You're not building a second business. You're just posting videos of yourself jumping in an ice bath. So, I mean, maybe I'm being too harsh. I just feel like the point of it was, again, is so many men are caught up in fads and thinking these little tricks here and there are really going to be the things that are going to make their lives so much better. But one of the things I tell legend builders, it's these small habitual actions that we take that are really going to culminate in a life well lived. And that's at the heart of what I do as a legend, as a coach, and in my legend builders programs.
I I appreciate that. I mean, one, I believe the small things are the big things. It's those little things, and it's not like you mentioned going along with the fad. It's taking care of your health, whatever that means to you. I don't give a shit if you jump in an ice bath, if you go into a sauna. Just be cognizant of doing something physical every day. Be cognizant of the input. Like, what are you consuming, not only nutritionally, what you're drinking, but also the social media piece. Like, what are the things that you're letting your brain absorb every single day? And then what is your output every day? Like spending time with loved ones, showing gratitude. Those are the things, those little tiny things. Listen, as long as you're moving, if your trajectory is moving you in that direction, again, I agree with you. It made me laugh. It made me smile when you said that, and I appreciate. And I'm glad that you pushed back against it a little bit. I'm glad that you.
Well, and I want to be clear here. Like take the legend or the legend, the Liver King, right?
Yeah.
He's a legend in his own way, right? I mean, like the guy's huge. He's clearly extremely athletic. I don't think he's natty. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I don't think a lot of people think he's natty, but who cares? Except he's telling people he's natty. That's the only issue. But point is, the guy's living his life the way he wants to live it. He's clearly marketing his products, and he's got, a lifestyle he's trying to market. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, I have nothing to say about him particularly. I'm just saying, guys trying to live like that and think that's going to be your outcome, it's not going to happen. You're going to, you need to focus instead on the high probability targets, right? Which are, as you said, working out, living right, spending time with family and friends, doing the basics, because those are the things that are going to really maximize your success and well-being. Then you can then add on eating bull testicles and whatever else you're going to do. I mean, if you're not doing the basics, those things aren't going to help you at all.
Yeah, it's funny. I did the ball tanning one time. I was like, let me just see what the fuck this is like. And then just finding a spot to do it. Like, not everyone has that privacy to be able to get out in the sunshine without getting arrested and pulling your junk out of your pants, right? It's a whole different level.
You got to get your custom infrared sauna built on Alibaba, because I mean, that's what you can do in the privacy of your home. I mean, and if you've done testicle sunning, you got to think about, rectal sunning. I mean, that's like yeah, why not?
A whole new thing. And then you need something that's going to spread your ass cheeks open when you're doing that. And hopefully there's no one else around that's interested in seeing
there you
that.
go.
Went off the rails a little bit, Lance. Apologize. I'm going to bring it back on track right now. My last question always is, someone that's listening to the podcast right now, if they got a lot of value of everything you brought so far to the table, they hit pause or stop on the episode right now, and there's one thing that they can do. It could be anything. It could be spiritual, physical, emotional, social. It could be a daily habit. What's one thing that someone listening can do right now that by doing this one thing, it can change the trajectory of their life?
Well, hire me as your coach. I mean, that's the
number one thing. There you go.
Besides that, I think the number one most impactful thing I ever did was I started keeping a daily record or a journal. We live in our head so much, and we spend so much time between our two ears, right? Like thinking. Very rarely do we ever put that onto paper, or I use just a Word document, date it, put some of the weather conditions and so forth. Because here's the thing: when we start recognizing patterns, we brought up patterns earlier in our life. We recognize certain days. That's the day we mess up and don't work out, right? I mean, we start noticing that pattern. Well, then we can fix the problem. Or we know that, I eat healthy, man, but Thursday rolls around, I'm stressed. And that's when I go to the bar for happy hour, and I wake up and I've had, 6 old fashions and 3 steaks or whatever. I don't know. I'm just thinking like those are things you need to write down and reflect on, writing down your dreams and analyzing them. But I do think just keeping a record, keeping a journal, creating a dialogue with yourself, understanding what is making you tick, your frustrations, your fears, and beginning to get that crud out of your mind and onto paper is the best therapy you'll ever do, and it's free.
Have you ever had any dreams that you look back on and you're like, what the hell was going on in my head last night?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I've recorded my dreams for well over a decade. I mean, I have thousands of pages of journaling. So but I cross-reference. So, when an individual or circumstance pops up, I will cross-reference it with previous instances and notice patterns. And then there's been, a number of, I would call them like dream cycles, where, you have a recurrent theme in a dream. But more often than not, I believe dreams are and this kind of gets into some of the subject matter I talk with my clients about, but, dreams are the language of the unconscious mind speaking to us through symbols. And I believe personally that dialogue goes both ways. So not only does our unconscious mind with all these latent abilities speak to us through symbols, and that can manifest in waking life as synchronicity and kind of, deja vu or things of that nature. We can actually communicate with our unconscious mind through the use of symbols as well. So that's one of the kind of proprietary technologies that I employ in my coaching.
I love that. And I would challenge anyone listening to this podcast to not dream about Chuck Norris eating liver, tanning his balls tonight as you go to sleep. It's going to be impossible. It's definitely going to happen.
He's like Freddy Krueger. He like visits you in your dream, whether you want it or not. Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly. Or like my kids love Stranger Things, so watch season 4 of Stranger Things, and the bad guy's Vecna, and it's like that Freddy Krueger kind of thing that gets into their heads and visits their subconscious. But there's so much there. We could do another episode just about that piece, that subconscious piece, and how the tie there is together. So real quick, who is the type of man that you're coaching? Who should reach out to you? Who is that guy that you're looking for, or that's literally looking for you?
Well, look, first of all, if you just want to talk to me and you think that, hey, I want to find out more about your program, visit legendbuilders.com and click the unlock your potential button, and you can set up a free 45-minute strategy session with me. And like, I'm going to be straight up. Yeah, I want you to hire me. I mean, and I charge money for it. I mean, I'm not here to tell you that, I'm not looking for that or think that's part of the plan. Of course it is. I run a business, but I don't hard sell people. And so if they, if men want to just talk and have a meeting with me and just get to know me and have that's fine too. But as far as like ideal clientele, I say up front, high achieving men looking to unlock their potential, because if you've already achieved like what the world has defined as success, but you still feel that you're unhappy, unfulfilled, it's because you're living a lie, right? You could be, an accountant with one of the big accounting firms, living in some suburb of Cleveland, driving a minivan, watching Friends reruns with your wife. And, by the definition of the world, like you're successful, like you live this, like, you have a good job, you're a CPA, you drive freaking, Pacifica hybrid minivan, and have a house with like a quarter-acre lot. Like you're successful, but Here's the truth: those things don't define success. They're not the things that make you happy. For passion and purpose and fulfilling dreams, and as I say, building your legend is what brings fulfillment in our lives. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, if you think like you have some potential that needs to be unlocked, that's what I help men do every single day, and I want to help you do it.
And so we can find you at legendbuilders.com. Tell us where else we can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, build.your.legend. And I'm available there. If you send me a message, we can chat that way. But ultimately, I'll send you back to my calendar link on my website, because that's the best way for me to get in touch with you and to make sure you'll get the Zoom link and invite, and we can get to know each other.
Awesome. Dude, this has been a really cool conversation. I've really appreciated it. Again, I'd love to run it back in the future after the audience got to know you a little bit and be a little more specific in a couple of the areas. For the Building Men audience, find us on Instagram, building.men. Our website is buildingmen.io. Check out our 2 sponsors, Finish the Race Apparel for all things building men, and Become Stronger Industries, the makers of handmade steel maces, hammers, and other badass equipment. The legend, Lance Kennedy, thank you so much, my man. Go one step further than you thought you could go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.